Viewers, listeners, subscribers, and followers of Accent Radio, and welcome to another exciting and wonderful intriguing edition of Let's Talk with Accent Litigation. I remain your host, Barrister David Njoko Ono, and today we'll be having a wonderful discourse, an insightful one, educative one for that matter. I hope you are with your Bible and your pen and paper to jot down our wonderful discourse and lecture for today. Today we are in asset litigation. What we do is that we simplify law, we dissect law, we make law so easy because we use basic common day languages for law. We leave the legal jargons for lawyers in the courts, and then here we speak law in plain language. That is making law easy. And today we'll be having another exciting topic for discourse today, which is police reports and treatment of victims of gunshots. Police reports and treatment of victims of gunshots. You remember, everywhere in this country, whether you are in the northeast or you're in the northwest, north central, south, southeast, or southwest, there is always one form of violence or the other. And so when you have violence, which is especially gun violence, there will be tendency of people being harmed. Now today, as usual, we'll be having a story to back up our discourse for today. And today's story, we're having two major characters. That is Abbas and Juliet. Now, Abbas happens to be the leader of a notorious gang terrorizing the beautiful city of Lagos. And they always go on bank robbery and big hits, criminal big hits, where they cash out so much large amount of money. So on this fateful day, Abbas and his gang went out on a bank robbery, and while shooting sporadically or exchange of gunfire with the police that engaged them, it happened that Juliet, a roadside granite seller, was hit by a stray bullet. Whether that stray bullet came from that of Abbas and his gang members or that of the police, nobody knows. But what we know is Juliet was hit by a straight bullet. Abbas, his own, he was equally shot at, but he was shot on his leg, and then he was crippled for that very moment. He couldn't run away. His gang members escaped, but Abbas was arrested. Now the policemen that arrested Abbas, basking in the euphoria that they have caught the most dreaded criminal terrorizing the beautiful city of Lagos, decided to jubilate in their white jubilation, forgot about Juliet, who was lying in the pool of her blood, and they zoomed off with Abbas to the police station. Now Juliet was left in the pool of her blood, and passerby couldn't help because they were afraid of what will happen if they help Juliet, and then it happens that the police come after them by way of harassment or embarrassing them for helping a gunshot victim. Juliet was there in the pool of her blood, and 3 hours later she gave up the ghost. She died. Now Abbas himself was paraded after the next day after his arrest, and he was paraded by the police force while he was still limping. In fact, he had to be helped by 2 other inmates to the parading ground where he was showcased to the media. Remember last week we talked about the right of prisoners, of which we talked that one of the rights of prisoners is the right not to be paraded, and also the right to life. These two components of the right of prisoners, we are going to discuss it today. It is important, and then making sure that you are up to date, you keep tabs with our lecture series. So Abbas was paraded, and with the blood stain on his legs, and then the wounds and all that. Now the question is, where is the law in all this? Where is the justice in all this? And there are things that the law states about this scenario. Are there rights that have been violated? That is what we are going to discuss today. I believe you understood the story, or you've gotten the story clear. Now, first of all, let's understand what is police report. What police report simply means is an official document detailing preliminary or supplementary investigative report of outcomes of investigation by police officers. It is official document detailing preliminary or supplementary investigative reports or outcomes of investigations by police officers. That is what police report means. Now, in this scenario, the storyline we used Abbas and Juliet, who were all victims of gunshots violence. Now, are there rights of victims of gunshot? Let's take that of Abbas and Juliet together. Now, they have the rights. Now, for Abbas and Juliet, they have the number one right, which is the right to life. And so, what the law provides is that every victim of gunshot should be accorded immediate treatment by a healthcare facility, whether public or private. Now, generally, the primary law that provides for the rights of victims of gunshot is the Compulsory Treatment and Care of Victims of Gunshot Act 2017. Compulsory Treatment and Care of Victims of Gunshot Act 2017. Now, this act provides that the number one right is that where victims of gunshot is brought to any facility, health facility, whether public or private health facility, that facility has to take that person immediately and start immediate treatment. So there is no time to waste, and then you begin to say you want to get your police report. The law forbids or prohibits police reports, demanding for police report as the condition precedent for treating a victim of gunshot wound. Now, number two is that victim of gunshot wound must be treated with or without initial monetary deposit. The victim doesn't have to deposit any money at all, whether by way of advance payment for him to be treated or her to be treated. So, assuming Juliet was assisted at the point when she was shot by stray bullet, hit by stray bullet, and she was assisted to any hospital, that hospital, whether public or private, owes it as long as they have the facility to treat Juliet, owes it as a duty to Juliet, whose right to life is at stake, to ensure that Juliet is taken into is being admitted, and then immediate treatment is administered on Juliet, with or without deposit of money by Juliet or volunteers who brought her to the hospital. So we've discussed two rights of the victim here. Now the third right is that the person with gunshot injury is free from inhuman or degrading treatment, either by volunteers or by the police. Now what this means is that because you're a victim of gunshots, you are still a human, and you are entitled to your right of life and right to personal dignity. So the police cannot say, okay, because you are a victim of gunshot wound, because what resulted to that gunshot wound is as a result of your criminal act, just like Abbas, who went on armed robbery and then he was shot by the police. Now, Abbas has the right to personal dignity, which includes right to treatment. So Abbas was supposed to be taken immediately to a health facility for immediate treatment. So the issue of Abbas being arraigned the next day with the same wound on his leg, and he was being held by two inmates to the parading ground where he was paraded to the media and asked to make his own statement. That is wrong under the law, because that is an infringement of his own right. He has a right to health care. He has a right to life. And irrespective of what happened, because whatever the scenario, even though he was caught red-handed at the act, committing the act of armed robbery, the law presumes him to be innocent until the otherwise is proven. Okay, and as such, the police owes him a duty of care to ensure that he is being taken to a health facility for immediate treatment, and also that in that treatment is to be given or is to be administered is to ensure that he is fit and proper to stand investigation, because as I say in law, only the living can be interrogated. So if Abbas being kept in the police custody and with his own wound, and then he is allowed to die in the custody, then the police has nothing to investigate anymore. So we ask the question, where is now the justice? Because justice has to take its course if Abbas is found guilty or one thing with respect to armed robbery. Having discussed this, we now discuss rights to volunteers or helpers of victims of gunshot wounds. Now, assuming what was the palpable fear for volunteers not assisting Juliet or taking her to the hospital to receive treatment? It was because they were afraid of police harassment and embarrassment by way of interrogation if they take Juliet to the hospital, because the hospital will always demand for police report, which we have stated that under the compulsory treatment and care of victims of gunshot wound, it is prohibited by our laws that victims of gunshot wound must be treated with or without police report. You don't need police report as a prerequisite for you to treat victims of gunshot wound. So if the volunteers has assisted Juliet, which is their obligation to do, if they have assisted Juliet to the hospital to receive medical attention, they are not to be harassed. The police cannot call them for interrogation simply because they only did a volunteering work and a humanitarian service, a humanitarian assistance, and it is even in the law under the compulsory treatment and care of victims of gunshot that if you are in a position to help or render assistance to a victim of gunshot wound and you fail to do so, or you do so with the intention of ensuring that that person's right is violated by way of inviting the police to immediately arrest him and take him away from the hospital to into custody, then you are violating that person's right. Okay, so the obligation on volunteers is to ensure that they present victims of gunshot wound to health facilities for them to receive immediate treatment. And then we'll discuss the obligations of hospitals. When these volunteers bring these victims to the hospital, what is the obligation of the hospital? The number one obligation is to take in these victims of gunshot wound and begin immediate treatment of them. Remember on the 25th of December 2022, the popular the Nigerian legal practitioner by the name Bolanle Rahim was shot by a trigger-happy police officer. And then remember, she was taken to 2 different hospitals and they couldn't attend to her. Okay, and that led to her death. So the obligations of the hospital is that they must immediately take that victim, and even if they don't have the facility to treat the victim, they must administer first aid treatment to that victim. Pending when the victim is going to be relocated to a better facility that has all the equipment to ensure that the due care and medical attention is given to that victim. Now the second obligation is that they have the obligation to report to the police the incidents of that victim of gunshot wound in their facility within 24 hours after admitting that victim in their facility. Now, failure to do this, the hospital and then the chief medical director becomes liable under the law and commits an offense under the law, which offense is punishable by either 6 months imprisonment for the chief medical practitioner or a fine of 100,000 naira to that hospital. Now, the third obligation is that they must keep record, up-to-date record of the victims of gunshot wounds who they have admitted in their hospital and then administered treatment to. So they must have that record in case the police needs that record for investigation in future. Those records should be readily available for the police and other sister security agencies to do their proper investigation. Then the fourth is that the hospital reserves the right and the obligation to police to ensure that first of all the obligation to the victim to ensure that the victim is only handed over to the police to take him into custody, him or her into custody, if he is fit, certified fit for investigation, to start investigation or interrogation. That is to say, Hajumin Abbas was taken to the hospital after he was being shot by the police. It is the duty of the chief medical director, owing it as an obligation to Abbas, to ensure that Abbas cannot be taken into custody by the police until he is certified to be fit to start investigation or interrogation. So back again in those days when we watch Nollywood movies, apologies to Nollywood producers, where we have victims or alleged criminals, and then they will be taken to the hospital after receiving gunshot wounds, and in the hospital bed, their hands will be handcuffed to the bed. No, to the bed rings. No, not at all. That is prohibited under the law. The law permits that the police can have surveillance within the parameters of the hospital to ensure that that victim is safe, number one, and number two, he or she doesn't escape. But the police cannot go ahead to shackle, handcuff, or restrain the victim at that state where he is receiving medical attention. So for the police to take him into custody, there must be a certification by the chief medical director of that facility where the victim is being admitted that he is now fit to stand health-wise to stand his interrogation and investigation. Now, having discussed this, we'll now discuss the obligation of police to victims of gunshot wound. Number one obligation is the obligation of to render possible assistance to victims of gunshot wound. Now, the police haven't been in the scene where Juliet was hit by a stray bullet. Shouldn't have been carried away by the euphoria of arresting or apprehending the notorious gang leader Abbas, so as to forget the victim who is struggling for her life, being Juliet. That the number one obligation of the police is to ensure that they take her and then ensure to take her to a facility where she is going to receive proper medical care. Number two is that the police owe it as a duty to commence investigation upon receipt of notification from the health facility where the victim is being admitted 24 hours after admission of that victim. Remember, we said earlier that it is one of the obligations of the health facility to give reports to the police 24 hours within 24 hours after admitting the victim of gunshot wound. And so it is not the duty of the police, having received the notice from the hospital or the health facility that a victim of gunshot wound has been admitted in their facility, to commence investigation. So they are not just to lay low, but they are to commence investigation. Now, failure of any police officer whose duty is to commence investigation upon receipt of the reports from or notification from the medical facility where the victim is being detained is an offence under the law, and it attracts a punishment of 6 months imprisonment or 100,000 naira fine. So police officers, be mindful. Once you receive notification from any police health facility asking you that or informing you that a victim of gunshot wound is in their facility or is being admitted and receiving treatment in their facility, and you are being assigned to conduct investigation, if you fail to conduct investigation, it is not just a relegation or a negligence, professional negligence. It is also a criminal offence not to commence or to do investigation or due diligence when it comes to investigation of that victim. Now, after investigating the victim, you have the duty, you owe it as a duty to the hospital to supply the hospital with the report of your investigation. So the report, police reports that is to be given is to come from the police to the hospital and not from the hospital to the police. Okay? The police report we need here, or that the law is now providing for, is the police report from the police after conducting the investigation on the victim to the hospital where the victim is being admitted, and not a report from the hospital seeking for permission to treat a victim of gunshot wound. It's like a reverse of the norm, what we had before or prior to 2017. Now we go to the penalties under the Act. We have discussed some of them in the course of the interaction. Now, one of the penalties under the Act is that, as we said earlier, if after 24 hours the facility fails to inform the police of the presence of a victim of gunshot wound in their facility, they commit a crime, and that crime is, the punishment is a fine of 100,000 naira or imprisonment of 6 months to the chief medical director of that facility. Now, the second is that the facility, health facility where the victim is being admitted, if the victim or the identity of the victim is being known to the management of the hospital, they owe it as a duty to his family members to inform them within 24 hours after such identification comes to their knowledge. So if the victim is being admitted and the victim was at the point of being admitted was unconscious, and supposing Juliet was admitted and then she was unconscious at the point of admission, If after regaining consciousness and she's not able to state her name and the name of any of her relatives or where she resides, and the name of anybody, that any contact person that can be reached. Now it is the duty of the hospital to reach such contact within 24 hours after the knowledge of the contact is being made to them. Failure to do that, they are liable to pay fine of 500,000 naira, or that medical practitioner who that knowledge came to his that notice came to his knowledge will stand the risk of being in prison for a month, 1 month imprisonment. Now this comes in the alternative. So it's either a fine of 500,000 naira or you being in prison for a month. Now generally, where we've talked about the obligations of volunteers, obligations of hospitals, and obligations of policemen. Now generally under section 9 of the act, being the compulsory treatment and care of victims of gunshot wound, now it provides that where anybody violates the rights of a victim of gunshot wound, which leads to his mental, psychological or physical disability, that offender commits an offense which punishment is not less than 5 years imprisonment and not more than 15 years imprisonment. Now that means if you are supposed to care for a victim, okay, of gunshot wound, and you decide, no, as a police officer I have to do my duty, and you decide to handcuff the victim, is less of a woman, a human being, or in the name of trying to ensure he or she is being secured in the facility, you stand the negative chance of being found liable and then being in prison for a term of 5 years and not more than 15 years imprisonment. Now, having discussed this, now what are the negatives? What are the factors that leads to victims of gunshot wound not being given care, and even when they are being given care, not being given adequate attention or care by facilities, health facilities? Number one is the factor of poor public health facilities. Most of our public health facilities are not up to date, not in terms of manpower, but in terms of equipment, medical equipment and facility to take care of emergency situations like that of gunshot victims. So government has to do their own part, which is upgrading our public health facilities to ensure that it can accommodate bigger space for victims of gunshot wounds, because that is an incident of emergency and exigency. Number two is that of expensive private health care. Now, most victims, when volunteers wants to help, they choose to go to public facilities which have little or no adequate equipment to take care of, health equipment to take care of or give aid to the victims of gunshot wound. So they would have preferred to go to private hospitals who have those equipment, but because of the high rates in terms of billing that they get from private health facilities, they are discouraged to take the victims there. And then when they begin to dabble with him, whether we should take him to he or her to private hospital or to public hospital, the victim is losing her life just holding her life by the thread, and then he or she may give up the ghost, just like Juliet in our story. Also, the fear of police harassment of volunteers and then health facility practitioners. Now, what this means is that health practitioners are always afraid of taking in victims of gunshot wound, because they feel that if they don't get police report and they begin commence treatment, the police will harass them. And most of the time it happens. This happens most of the time. So it is not a phantomic story. It is not something that comes out of the blues. It's not a mere fiction. It is what actually happens in real life. And so police officers are to be educated, to be enlightened on their role and responsibility, the obligation they owe, which includes not to harass medical practitioners or volunteers who decide to assist victims of gunshot wound. Now, having discussed this, as usual, we know you have been enlightened and you have been educated on the issues of police reports and treatment of victims of gunshot wound, so that today you will now know your rights. When next you come across a victim of gunshot wound, whether by way of accidents or by way of criminal acts, you know that you owe it as a responsibility to take that person to the hospital, and then you know the parameters of your rights, so that to avoid police harassment or embarrassment. Thank you very much for listening to us, and as usual, we will always want to get your feedback and your comments. Please ensure that you get your comment across to us by typing your comment at the comment box section of whatsoever streaming platform you are watching us from, and as usual, we will always give you prompt response. Remember, the article of today's topic will be published it's already on our website. Just go to info@lawaccent.com, and then you will get the article and the previous article, whether any of the episodes we have been running all through this year. You will always get the article when you get to our website, which is info@lawaccent.com. Until we come and give your way next time, please remain blessed, remain safe, and always pray for a better Nigeria. Thank you. Bye-bye.